Oh, this is a test, Tony. Can you hear me?
Eventually, we'll get all these tech issues worked out. Mr. Neal is remote. Mr. McCracken should be dialing in, and Mr. Weatherford should be dialing in. So we'll call to order and do a roll call. So
Elborn here.
Jerry Good here. John Gamelke here.
Tony Perry,
David Mijares here.
Rebecca Anderson here.
Rusty,
and we also have Mr. Marcus McCaskill, the DDA attorney, and then Rusty.
Rusty Neal here.
Okay, we didn't hear you, Rusty, by the way.
Can you hear me now?
He's still
He's
on
on
mute.
No, he took it off.
I see mute right on the screen.
No, he took it off.
Yeah, I'm not on mute.
Always technical issues. Well, I see him, so we will count him here while he works on his microphone. All right. Pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I will ask, are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda? Seeing none, hearing none, we'll move on. I will entertain a motion for approval of the minutes of January 10th, 2023.
Discussion or
Huh?
do we have discussion? after?
So we get them.
Minutes.
Okay,
Mijares second.
we have a first and a second, Mr. Bourne, Mr. Mijares, and Mr. Good. Discussion?
Yes, I'd like to, and I contacted Rebecca earlier about it. The on page 6.
Okay.
It says Jerry Good stated that he recalled the agreement, and it should say it included personal property tax on that.
Thank you for that clarification. That's very germane. Anything else?
Good by me.
Okay, so we have a first and a second, with the board's concurrence, we will, on page 6, under B, we will add Jerry Good stated that he recalled the agreement. And it includes personal property tax, and we're referring to the agreement with Taylor Mountain, correct? And I guess from yeah. That'd be good. So we will call for the question. Those in favor with the correction?
Born, yes.
Good, yes. Gamelke, yes.
Perry, yes.
Mijares, yes.
Anderson, yes.
Neil,
Rusty?
could you hear that?
I think he's on mute on our
No,
side.
no. You click on it and it says, I promise.
Yes.
Okay, yes, from Rusty. Okay, so Rusty, this is, if you don't get your sound, here you go. Thumbs up. Thumbs down.
Roger that.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of January 24th, 2023.
Born will move to approve the minutes of January 24th, 2023.
Anderson will second.
All right, any discussion? Okay, we will call for the vote.
Born, yes.
Good, yes. Gamelke, yes.
Perry, yes,
Mijares, yes.
Anderson, yes.
Neil, yes.
and Rusty was a thumbs up. Okay. So the only thing I'll point out again is because we missed that 38-minute window on the 10th. Both meetings in January were technically considered special meetings to make sure that we remedied that mistake. Surprise, surprise, pretty much a technical glitch again, but we're getting them knocked down. All righty then. Is there any public comment of items not on the agenda? I think you'll notice that this meeting, the DDA has adopted kind of the format that the city uses to stay consistent, being a quasi-governmental entity under the city. So I see none. In the future, we'll have a sign-up sheet in the back somewhere to the city, just in case we have a fun meeting. Okay, unfinished business. First order of business is Tava House Properties. Oh. Woodland Station contract and addendum. I suspect we have the sound working now. All right. So board, you got the we've had discussions, we being myself and Mr. Neo with our attorney, Mr. McCaskill, over the last couple of weeks with a lot of these things that you're going to see today. But yesterday, we had a meeting, Ms. Riddell, or Ms. Anderson, and myself and Mr. McCaskill, the city attorney, Mr. Lawson, and basically the conversation was around obviously the city council's role in approving this contract. And we've talked about this before, but we'll be very clear that ultimately, right now, the DDA technically owns the property because that was done for a specific reason back in the day. But the city council is the entity that approves any contract that we do with Tava. Okay, and that's very important to know. So I think where we landed yesterday is we've presented here kind of like the standard form contract on the purchase. We've presented an initial addendum that could go with that contract with the intent to protect the interest of the city, the interest of the community, and hopefully Tava as well. But the reality of it is that the attorneys still have a lot of work to do because there's probably, and I can have Mr. McCaskill weigh in on this, there's some other agreements that have to be done to make sure that we do protect the city. And so out of that meeting, kind of where we're landed is the goal today for the DDA with respect to the Tava contract, the draft, I will call it, the Tava addendum draft, is to basically approve it in its current form and advance it to the city council for them to do their work to finalize it, if that makes sense. And so rather than us spend months trying to dial in a contract that ultimately the city council, we may not address things the city council wants addressed. And so our goal today is to hopefully advance this on to city council, and then they will dial it in, they'll come to an agreement or not with Tava and execute the agreement. Now, what the city council is suggesting is that on February 16th, they do an executive session that includes all the council members, also inviting myself, Ms. Anderson, and probably Tava to work out, to have enough discussion to give the city council enough information so that they can direct the attorneys as to what needs to happen in the agreements. So, so that's really where we're at. Is there anything you would like to weigh in on if you want to turn on your mic? If you do.
Chair Perry, I think that was a good summary. I think in terms of next steps and looking back at the original disposition and development agreement that the DDA and the city entered into in 2009 and the subsequent amendments to that, it was always contemplated that the city would have to approve any sort of conveyance of the property or development agreement between the DDA and a future developer. So at this point, I think it is important to get the city involved in the process to make sure that the city is comfortable with the terms on which the conveyance will occur. Secondly, that development and disposition agreement assumed that the DDA would be the main party to the development agreement with the developer, with the city as a third-party beneficiary. Here, because the property is going to be conveyed to Tava Group for development on terms that will be approved by both the DDA and the city, I think it makes sense to contemplate that maybe there's a development agreement between the developer and the city that will outline, for example, how the phasing will occur, that certain subdivision improvement agreements will be required for each phase and how that infrastructure will ultimately be constructed. So I think that, the good news is I think we're close. I think at this point, we just need a little bit of direction from the city in terms of what that kind of master development agreement will look like. And then assuming we get some clear direction on the 16th, we should be able to move forward and get that agreement as well as the addendum and the contract finalized so that ultimately that can be approved by the DDA, can move this process forward. I don't know if that helped or.
I think it did. And there's a couple other points we'll probably have to weigh in on. So one point of discussion that I think is, we've talked about this over the last 6-7 months. So there is an element to this process where the DDA, quote, has a design review committee. In the past, it was constituted with 2 persons, which I think any committee with 2 persons is already set up for failure personally. Then we talked about maybe the DDA, the entire DDA being the design review committee. And I guess what I want to, since we're going to be redoing these agreements and how this is going to work, I would like to hear from DDA members, each of your perspectives on whether, because from my chair, my position is whatever Tava does, they have to go through the normal city entitlement requirements. They're going to have to meet all the normal city requirements to get this development going. Now, there is the additional element of the overlay district, but I guess from my perspective, I trust the professionals at the city planning commission and ultimately city council has to decide anyway on all these matters. I wouldn't mind if we deselect ourselves as a design review committee. I mean, I don't know what value we would add to the process in terms of making it better for the citizens of Woodland Park for our effort. But that's just my opinion. And so I guess I wanted to see if anyone else had any thoughts around that issue.
Right here. Excuse me, the design review was set up basically to have a certain character and flavor. I think it was Joe Napoleon, am I correct? That and it was we're conveying land with incentives. They're getting a prime downtown location, and there should be conditions set forth. So I'm hesitant to see us just kind of say, well, whatever the planning department wants, or would approve. They're not looking at it with the same conditions that was originally designed to be. Can I start or make a comment about your executive session issue at this point?
Uh, let's finish this discussion. I'll
Okay.
circle back to that because I anticipated that.
Yeah.
So it's not a DDA executive session, it's a city council executive session. So anyway, okay, so anyone else want to weigh in on the issue around the design review committee?
Tony, is there a set guideline that the city has already in place that we would be following anyway, or who sets the architectural guideline of what the building should look like? Does the city have something like that in place that we would be following anyway? Yeah, I mean, is that our parameters?
Contained within the city's zoning regulations, there is a section that does provide some broad guidelines associated with architectural design. Emphasis on the word broad.
Yeah.
If there's a particular aesthetic that is desired, that ideally should be part of what I think is identified within any contracts, potentially even the development agreement. So if you want to be more specific about materials choices, combinations of materials, percent of fenestration on buildings, landscaping standards, there's some of that ability to do that. That's my understanding.
Yeah, that is my understanding as well. I guess my position is that we each have our own perspective on what we like, don't like. I would prefer that if the city planning department's guiding it, it's going to be consistent with what's being done or has been done within the city versus what our personal perspectives are. When I attended the lawsuit, there was a lot of discussion around the design review committee and some of those requirements that frankly, I would be embarrassed even to repeat at this meeting. So anyway, so anyone else want to weigh in?
Tony, can you hear me?
Yes, Rusty, go ahead.
Now, I have been playing with my microphone and I think I have it now working. I agree with you, Tony, that the standards of the city, I think, should be the guiding force, not individual desires. I mean, we as a board should be able to cast our vote that we don't like something, but as long as it is in compliance with the general zoning requirements for anything downtown, whether it's in Woodland Station or anywhere in Woodland Park, those broad guidelines should be the fundamental guide, in my opinion.
Okay.
And I would just state that, typically the city has some minimal standards for architectural review. I think of greater concern is more of the site review on a project that's going to be multi-phased and possibly have separate players. And that's generally, the purview of the master developer to set those site standards, things like light standards and trash cans and the way you do the curbs in those aspects. And, all the projects I've done, in the Springs that are large scale commercial developments, the master developer who's coming in and footing the infrastructure bill kind of sets those standards, falling within city parameters for those aspects.
Ms. Anderson?
I'm thinking about this.
Okay.
I mean, I understand your point of view, but I also kind of agree with Rusty in that, it would be nice to be able to have some kind of overview or vote of the master plan. I feel a sense of responsibility as the part of this DDA to make sure that whatever is being put into our community and we are approving, that we agree with what that is. So I'm kind of, I don't know if we need if we need a committee, we can put it aside and just go with the city, but in a way, I feel like we have a responsibility as well.
Well, there is a alternative to, I guess, my initial position that we, obviously the developer is going to go through all these entitlement processes, assuming we get the property conveyed. we can reserve the right to give the final okey dokey. Again, I would suggest that it's the entire board that does that, not a subcommittee. We do that out in the open. So we can always reserve the right to do final quote, design review committee as a board approval of whatever emerges in this entitlement process.
Yeah.
Is that a good compromise?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
Okay, so that still allows us to weigh in. So if we see something that we're concerned about, or if we want to reserve the right to battle the city on a particular element, we can help the developer, I guess, theoretically.
I mean, I wouldn't be too happy if they painted the building purple.
Okay.
So,
Purple's a good, okay, so I guess what I'm hearing, and I'll just say, it seems like, and Matt is also saying he's on the line, but he doesn't know that we could see or hear him. Can you talk, Matt? Do you have your mic off?
Tony, who was that directed to?
Matt? Okay. Well, we'll keep going. We're not gonna hold up because of tech issues. Okay, so I think we have a consensus that we're gonna reserve our right to weigh in on the design review as a board. And we'll know when it's appropriate to do that as we walk through this entitlement process. Is that fair?
Yeah.
You have a consensus? Rusty? Thumbs up? Okay.
Certainly is very difficult, when you get into the design process.
Mhm.
Probably the marketplace would have a major impact on what is going to be acceptable and what is not. So maybe government doesn't have to be as involved as the marketplace,
Well,
because if it's really ugly, the marketplace will probably not support it.
correct. Yeah, so I guess I have confidence that we've gotten a lot of good projects in our community done through the city processes. So I feel confident we'll be able to navigate through here.
Right.
Okay, so the next item I wanted to discuss, and then we'll get back to your issue on executive session, Mr. Good, is the V cup. And so what's in the packet here, starting on page 40, is looks like the final cost estimate. And basically, this is for, there's a lot of terms for it, but I call it the phase 1, phase 2 environmental in my world.
Hang on, let me just look down here.
It looks like, oh, hey, Josie.
Hey, yeah, finally looks like I got something working. I have been here the whole time. I just haven't had any video or audio till now.
Okay, is there anything on anything we've discussed so far that you want to weigh in on?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay, so the Tava Group has provided us the agreement from Matrix. They in fact have signed it, which is pretty bold in my opinion, yet another show of commitment to this project prior to even owning the property. The V Cup total for and reading through it, it looks like what they're going to do is the original boreholes on the property, they're going to go down and retest those. But the state engineer, because I sat in on that meeting, is recommending a lot more boreholes, especially further south on the property, like on the other side of the drainage ditch. The state was concerned whether any of the benzene effluent had gone into, let's say, the trailer park that's on the south side of the DDA property. And so it is appropriate that that be tested. Again, from my perspective and my other job, typically in these situations, the seller of the property would pay for these kind of processes or negotiate. And so what we're suggesting is splitting the cost. And I want to remind the board that there are no realtor fees on either side of this transaction. So that's quite a bit of savings in the big picture. And that's unusual as well with these kind of transactions, in my opinion. So I guess the question is, as we push this to the city for them to finalize the agreements, we need to know whether this board has an appetite to split that cost of the environmental with the Tava Group to the tune of $38,900. Now, will the DDA be writing a check for that? I would argue not. I would argue that it would be deducted or be a credit on the contract, so it just comes off the total sales cost, if you will. So if there's buying it for 800,000, you can deduct 38,900. And then there will be some smaller additional fees, like typically in these transactions, both sides split the cost of like title work, to make sure that the property is conveyed properly. And so I need a consensus from board or approval from board that we're in agreement that we split this cost 50-50. Let's say Tava goes away and we try to find the next buyer. As seller of the property, we have to take care of these things and we have to know what we're selling. We have to know whether there's still environmental issues or not and what they are. And so I think this is, in my opinion, fair and reasonable to split this cost 50%. So any other thoughts, comments?
Didn't we agree to a $10,000?
We did, but it ballooned to 77,900.
So we're just asking for an additional 28,000.
Yeah.
From what we had originally.
From the original 5, correct. Yeah, so and it's kind of what I anticipated. I feared it would be worse than this, frankly, based on the original cost of the V cut back in 2008. So I find it reasonable. I toyed with the idea of community, the city, to go get other bids on this. And the reality of it is Matrix knows this property. If we go get another firm do this, it's going to be even more. I'm not a betting person, but I know that would be the case. So,
Excuse me, Tony. I would argue that they were fully aware that there was benzene in the ground when they agreed to this. It was brought forth. So any expense occurred, they were aware that they were going to have to deal with this. I think it's not correct to put the burden back on the taxpayers. I think right now with the DDA agreeing to pay for infrastructure, the price of the property, I think they're getting a great deal, and that's just the cost of doing business for them.
so what is the great deal? We haven't agreed to pay anything in terms of infrastructure. We haven't seen.
That's what I'm
Anything like
saying
that.
right now. That's a big, that I will reiterate, is a valid concern to sign a contract without a infrastructure estimate cost, some idea of what we are paying them to do. So anyway, yeah, I don't agree with contributing to the
Okay.
cost of the benzene.
Mr. Bourne.
I would agree that as the seller of the property, we need to define what the property is that we're selling. So I would concur, a 50-50 split is very acceptable to me. I do have one other concern, and maybe we get off, take care of this topic first, and then I'll address the plume afterward.
Let's do that.
How long would this last? Like, say Tava House did back out, how long would this be good for?
Well, I think the last B cup was 10 years. I think 10 years is pretty standard. We as the DDA let the original V cup expire in 2018 when we could have probably spent less money to get it extended and tested at that point. So, but we are where we are. Thoughts? Any other thoughts? Mr. Maharis, from a technical perspective, anything you want to add?
No, I would just concur I was on that call with the state and, confirming, one of the reasons we're doing this is, given that benzene's fairly migratory, there's an anticipation that plume has moved. So it's either moved out of the area, which would be the best possibility we could hope for, or you know, it has migrated farther south and is moving into other properties. And that's kind of what the state wanted us to define with this update to the VCUP.
Excuse me. I'm
Tony, I'll add
sorry.
I'll add
With
my.
all-
Wait, hold on. Go ahead, Rusty. We'll come back to you.
Do you want to
Rusty?
go with Matt first and then?
Okay, go ahead, Nat. Go off mute.
Got it. Click off
Yep.
mute.
You're good.
What was the exact question for me? Sorry, if I wanted to weigh in.
Weighing in on essentially splitting the V cup or the environmental expense 50-50 with the Tava Group. The
I-
seller of the property.
I'm in approval of it, and the reason I'm in approval of it, is, I do some developing in other municipalities, other cities. And it's always, it's a good thing to help, progress in your community, especially when it's a highly needed in an area. So, and I think that's a big part of our job is to encourage this and not discourage a developer.
Mr. Neal,
Well, I think of it in terms of any acquisition of a piece of property. If I'm the seller and I have a obligation to do a disclosure when I sell a piece of property that I know there's something wrong. If it was my house and I knew there was something going on, I have to disclose at least what I know. My expectation and my experience is the buyer, when they see a disclosure of something, they normally come back and say, well, I'll tell you what, the best I'll do is I'll split the cost with you, but I want to know more about it. So I'm actually pleased that we're only paying for half of the investigation to renew the V cup as the owner of the property trying to sell it. It's something we are well aware of. There's a problem. So we have to disclose that. And the fact that they're willing to split the price, I think is a very fair position to fully understand what the true condition of the property is that we are trying to sell or do something with. So I very much support a 50-50. I think it's actually a very good deal for the seller.
okay, I'll go back to Mr. Good. You had some final comments?
Yeah, I do. And David, while I totally respect your knowledge and it's really valuable to all this, but do you have a connection with development at Woodland Station?
I have stated that I am the civil engineer for the project currently.
Hmm.
I am going to continue, Jerry, to advise the board on technical aspects. If you noted that in my comments, I did not state whether, you know, the vote from the board should be, you know, pro or con in this issue, but I provided technical insight in furtherance of your discussion of it.
Yeah, I would just like it for the record that this condition does exist.
And I will continue to recuse myself from any voting on this.
Okay.
Yeah, and on this point, Mr. Good, for the next meeting, I would like you to draft a statement that we could put on the record so that we don't have to continue revisiting this issue as both Mr. Maharis and Mr. Weatherford have been recusing themselves appropriately. So, but I like hearing from a technical expert on this, and Mr. Maharis adds great value to the knowledge base of this board.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But it is a conflict.
And that's why he recuses himself on any vote related to this matter, period. Okay, so give me a statement. We'll put it on the record. I'll even put it in the agenda every month if you want, so that I don't have to hear it anymore.
Colorado Revised Statute 25-819
Understood?
States conflict of interest. That would be my statement, and it's in our.
Again, I would like a statement from you signed. We'll put it on the record. I'll put it in the meeting every month for you. Okay,
Good.
thank you. All right, so I guess the question becomes, Marcus, I'm going to you. We have another agenda item later. 7C. And the question is, do I ask for a motion to formally have this board vote on whether we participate in the V Cup expense at this juncture, or should we wait until 7C, or what's your advice?
Chair Perry, I think you could do it either way, but I think to the extent that we're going to be asking for, the board to consider certain authorizations for moving this forward. I mean, obviously, one of those key elements is the 50% share of the V Cup. So I think we could probably defer that to 7C, but given that we've just had the discussion now with the board, it may not be a bad idea to have a short motion to confirm that at this point. And it's really up to you as the chair to decide on how you'd like to do that.
Well, my instinct is to entertain a motion now so that the rest of the discussion doesn't get bogged down by this issue. So I would entertain a motion from the board either way for approving sharing the expense of 50-50 with Kava of $38,900. So I would entertain a motion, or to the opposite of vote.
Bourne would move forward with the sharing of the V Cup examination. And that the 50% of requirement for the DDA board be then applied as a credit to the sale price.
Correct. That's what, yeah. Okay, do we have a second?
Anderson will second.
Okay, now discussion, let's go in order. If there's any further discussion,
No further from me.
okay, Mr. Good.
in here.
I hear what Jerry is saying, but I also feel like we are responsible for having this test done, should we move with somebody else in the future. So I would agree that we should share half the expense.
No further comment,
None.
Ms. Anderson?
My only comment would be that we are the owners of the property and it is our responsibility, whether it's this project or another project, to know what is happening, and we're able to have a savings of 50%. So that would be my only comment. I would agree with it.
Mr. McCracken,
I don't have any further comments on it.
Mr. Neal,
No further comments. Thank you.
okay, we will call for the vote, starting with Mr. Bourne.
Bourne, yes.
Good, no.
Gamelki, yes.
Perry, yes.
Mijares recused.
Anderson, yes.
McCracken, yeah.
Neil, yes.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. All right. Okay,
Mr. Perry,
yes, sir.
I still have a comment, a reflection on the plume.
Yes, sir.
Is now a good time, or do you want to? Later.
We're on this topic, so yeah, I think
Okay.
now's just as appropriate as any other.
And possibly, you may need to also direct this for legal, for reflections too. I'm kind of curious, I see the proposed plume motion that has occurred over time on this document.
Mhm.
If it is continuing to grow, is there a risk factor for people downstream? If this plume continues to migrate, that would come back to impact the DDA or the owner of this property. Likewise, at the up end of that plume, we have never defined where the source is. Is that important?
Yeah, so I will, since I did sit in on the meeting with the state Matrix Engineering Tava, I'll tell you what I recall, because I just
Yeah.
listened. I didn't really talk at all. And I will have Mr. Mijares correct me if I say something that's not accurate. Okay, so it's my understanding that it has been established that the benzene source was across the highway.
Yeah.
And that's good, because if it originated on this property, it would be seriously problematic, and probably, we have a dirt patch for here till eternity. So I think the benzene plume was established as originating across the highway I can't remember exactly what the old time thing that was there that
Sure.
supposedly caused it. What I heard from the state engineer is, I mean, it could be something with our decomposed granite. You know, that benzene could be already down Fountain Creek, you know, in the Gulf of Mexico or something. So, but I think what I heard from the state engineer is they just want to make sure that it hasn't creeped over into the other properties, particularly the trailer park, I believe.
Yes.
And I don't know what the mitigation requirements would be for Tava, if that has occurred. I'm really not sure. But I think it is appropriate that we find out, that we know whether it's gone or whether it has migrated and what the impact is and what the mitigation requirements are.
And it certainly appears to me that we are, you might say, the victim in this situation. And there could be other victims downstream from us if it's still migrating and if the point source is still contributing.
Well, yeah, I guess what I would say is I suspect that there is no upstream ability for us to get a recourse from upstream providers. Now, we as city now, if we've contributed down, I don't know what the legal ramifications are if it has gone over into the trailer park,
Yeah.
frankly. So, so I think there's a lot to be determined. That's what this report is going to give guidance on. And then, of course, legal will weigh in, and then Matrix, of course, will give mitigation recommendations. Am I missing something or saying something incorrectly, Mr. Maharis?
No, I think it's been identified that the point source is gone, you know, in some of the original studies. And so it's not contributing further to that. It's just how that plume migrates through the soil and in which direction it's moving. And
Okay.
as it migrates, it tends to dissipate and to see exactly what the levels are and if those levels are still under state jurisdiction for mitigative efforts.
So as near as we know now, the risk level for us or the new purchasers is fairly minimal.
Yeah, I mean, right now, you know, in the old report, the mitigation efforts were primarily you'd have to put in, you know, foundation vents typical to what you would do for a radon system, which is typical up here, and some level of control for commercial structures. When you got into residential structures, there's probably more efforts that would need to be taken, including, you know, some over excavation and limiting of that seep into the residential footprints.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I would note that I think it's been 14 years since the original report.
Sure.
So it will be good for us, the city, the developer, to know exactly where we stand 14 years later. So, okay, so we will move on. And the next is Taylor Enterprises. And for those of you who grabbed a packet off the internet on the city site or one in the room here, I did make a pretty strong statement that I want to make it clear. Mr. Taylor approached the DDA and basically said that he was led to believe that the reimbursement for his TIF deal included real and personal property. And in this particular project, the personal property is material because he put up a automated car wash. And so that car wash equipment is considered personal property for purposes of taxes with the county. Now, I want to make it very clear. I think I did so in this statement, but if you look at the January 10th DDA special meeting minutes and look at the video with some of my comments, some of our board members' comments, it could have been inferred that Mr. Taylor had done something wrong. And I want to uncategorically state he did not.
Yeah.
I think that he had every right to question the contract, whether his understanding was right or not. He also provided a lot of other materials supporting his position that he believed it was the intent of the DDA to include the personal property. We have uncovered additional documents on the record at the time that may or may not support that. My personal opinion, it probably does. What does that mean legally? What does that mean with respect to this board and how we do things? Not sure yet, but Mr. Taylor has given us grace to spend the rest of this month before the March meeting to continue gathering information, speak with our attorney, work with him to determine where exactly we are on this. What I will say is, again, we're a volunteer board. In previous volunteer boards, we all make mistakes, and I'm not ready to give my complete personal opinion on this yet. Because, we do have a contract that is maybe a little gray with respect to speaking to this point. I'm not sure. But that's why we have an attorney, and that's why we'll gather all the materials for the attorney to review with us and make sure we come to the right answer to do the right thing, whatever that is. Okay,
May I?
sure.
First off, I believe that we got it wrong when, excuse me, when we indicated that personal property tax is not included in a TIF agreement, that I've got CRS 31-25-807 states taxes shall include all levies authorized to be made on an ad valorem basis upon real and personal property. So our past deals have all included personal property. Gold Hill Theaters, the loan which you carry the loan on, I believe.
There is no loan anymore. So
Yeah, but so that was an example. Then the comment about the parrot that stated no personal property on it. I've got a copy of the contract and it actually says property tax. So if we take a critical look back at all of our agreements, they all did include personal property tax. It wasn't stated in the contract because that was to us known to be a part of the TIF agreement, was personal property. So I would suggest that we look into that as to, I think there was misinformation put out.
So, your correction of the minutes of what you stated earlier. And I think I just communicated that that's what we're looking into. So we're on the same page. What we want to do is get to the right answer. That is what the previous board agreed to. You obviously being a previous board member can weigh in on that. We may need to ask some other previous board members to kind of validate some of the emails and comments we've seen on the record. So we will get to the bottom of this. And as I have committed to Mr. Taylor, we will gather all the data, we'll get legal to weigh in, and we'll work really hard to come back with the right answer that is right for the community, right for Mr. Taylor. Okay, so I think we're on the same page. Okay, any other comments on this matter? I guess I just want to punctuate again that this board is committed to making sure we get to the right answer. And, we have no illusions that we're perfect, that we don't make mistakes. We've already made a few in the last couple of months, but we're always going to take ownership of them and remedy them, period. So.
Yeah, Tony, I would like to be on the record, joining in with both Jerry's comments and yours, because I did sit in the meeting with yourself and Mr. Taylor, and he did present additional documents. I was of the opinion going into when we had the last DDA meeting and discussed it, I was thinking that it was limited to just the real property, but having seen the additional documents that are a part of our records, in my opinion, and I agree with you, we need to let the legal process with our attorney run its course over the next month through March. But the testimony from Jerry, his memory, when you look at the documents that do exist, it is fairly clear in my mind that the intent was for both real and personal property to be included. So there is no differentiation when they talk about the type of property. It just says property tax. It doesn't say personal property tax or real property tax. The word was inserted, property tax, and the other documents support that it was both. So I know we all have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers, but we also have a moral obligation to do what's right for the DDA and for Mr. Taylor. And I do agree with Jerry's position and Tony's position that it does appear that the right course of action is to include the personal property. Thank you, Tony.
Okay. Yeah, and I want to add at this juncture also that starting to dig deeper, these documents from our previous board weren't very organized, in my opinion. I now question whether the financial spreadsheet that we kind of inherited is actually accurate. So Mr. Vesalati from the city and I, along with Ms. Anderson, are going to go through and validate all of the previous data points with all the TIF deals, which will require some effort and work. But I think, for instance, it appears that our data shows that Mr. Taylor was paid a TIF reimbursement in 2021, and we can't find record of that. And Mr. Taylor can't find record of that. So it's clear we have some work to do to make sure that we shore up our information, our data, and make sure we get it accurate for the benefit of all.
Can I make a comment on that, please?
Sure.
And that is, I strongly encourage that you bring in Tanner to help clarify that. I believe he would be more than willing to do that, but to actually get the correct answers and information, it would be a shorter path to include Tanner in those talks.
Okay, we will consider that.
Okay.
I'm going to do a little bit out of order. So I'm going to ask Mr. Taylor, do you want to make any comments or are you good for today? Okay, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Mr. Weaver, I neglected to give you a moment, maybe two, to give us a quick TAVA update.
I'll make it quick. Good morning, everybody.
I have a question about.
So you've heard all about the B Cup and Matrix, and we've signed that engagement letter, Steve, with phase 2 and updated B Cup. You heard about that. This week we'll engage a traffic engineer to do the traffic study. It's going to be, we've been talking with various traffic engineers.
Tony, it's very hard to hear, and I don't know if the recording is capturing the comments.
Maybe just grab the other mic, Michael.
That was live. There you go. Okay, good morning. So you heard about the V Cup. We've signed the engagement letter with Matrix to get going on the phase 2 and the updated V Cup. We're talking with traffic engineers to get the traffic study going. We've interviewed several. We got it narrowed down to 2. We'll select that probably later this week or first part of next week for the traffic study. And then our architect and our civil engineer are working together to complete the submittal package to the city. And we should have that by the end of this month. By the end of this month.
Okay.
Yep. Any questions?
I heard a rumor that you've already started construction documents as well.
That's right. CDs are going. That's part of what Echo Architecture is doing.
Okay,
several meetings between Echo Architecture and Victor Matthews, Chef Victor Matthews, to get the floor plan straight and settled. And that's what they're working on now is the CDs.
Ms. Anderson, did you have a question? So any other questions for Mr. Weaver? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony.
Ms. Anderson.
I just wanted a little clarification on our TIF agreements that we are putting in place going forward. Based on our last meeting, I think it was the consensus of our board, the DDA board, that we did not want to include personal property. So going forward, I would think we would need to have more clarification around what we're doing in our agreements with that.
Well, I could tell you from my perspective, and I think Mr. Neal was part of these discussions. Once we get through the contract process with Tava, it is on Mr. McCaskin's to-do list, so to speak, of looking at the TIF reimbursement agreements. From my unlegal perspective, and looking at Mr. Taylor's TIF reimbursement agreement in great detail, we have some work to do there, I think, to shore that up, to clarify that. And remember, we as a board can decide what goes into those agreements. We just want to make sure that it's as clear as possible, as clear as any legal document can be.
I agree.
So, okay, so we're gonna jump to 6C, AJ's Pizza.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
sir.
Chair Perry, if I may just provide a quick comment in response to that. It's clear that the statute in Colorado, right, and it's actually the statute that Mr. Good mentioned earlier, 31258073, does permit a downtown development authority to utilize the increment that is associated with both the ad valorem tax that is imposed on real property and personal property, and also the DDA's foundation plan that I believe was formally adopted, all the way back in 2002, does identify the ability to utilize the increment on both real and personal property tax. So to Board Member Anderson's point, though, it is up to one or both of those potential revenue streams on a particular DDA reimbursement agreement or TIF agreement. That being said, there are some projects, and I think Mr. Taylor's project would fall into that category where, a large chunk of the assessed value is probably attributed to personal property rather than just real. So, I mean, that's something that has to be taken into account on a case by case basis.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. All right. AJ's Pizza, in the packet, I basically made the statement that at a previous meeting, it was pretty much a consensus of the board that we would consider a TIF reimbursement agreement, even though they are approaching the end of their project. Some board members indicated they would be open to possibly a deal regarding public improvements. Some board members indicated that it was important to get the agreement done, at least in principle, prior to the certificate of occupancy. We did receive yesterday an update from AJ's Pizza. Basically, I don't know why it's not in here. I'm becoming not a fan of Adobe Acrobat. Let me do this.
57.
Page 57?
Yep.
No, there was an actual cost breakdown. Should be included. Well, I don't know why it's not in here, but basically, there was a breakdown of four. And maybe they can enlighten us, four, go ahead and go it up if you want, four, areas of public improvements totaling approximately $100,000. That would be great, thank you, because I have no idea why it's not in here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so the four categories were sidewalk, steps, railings, drainage pond, drainage asphalt, landscaping required for the public facilities for a total of $101,296. And so they also, Mr. Langley brought his drawings. And so I think at this time, it's probably good to hear from you, sir, as to where you're at, where you're at with respect to the CEO, so that we can discuss this in earnest now that we have what we asked you for were the cost of those public improvements. And so you've provided those.
And Tony, real quick before we get started, this is another project in Woodland Park that I have completed work on. My contract was completed roughly 6 months ago. I did a drainage letter and designed the drainage pond.
Okay.
That they have since constructed, but I
Okay.
am not currently under contract with the Melvicks.
Okay. Thank you for that disclosure as appropriate.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Well, very good. Good morning. Back to our activity here with you. Thank you very much for considering our request. We are closing in on completion of the project, and we're hopeful to have a CO, at least a temporary CO, within the next week or so. So what you see that we've accomplished there, in a sense, we've provided the performance before the promise to provide the performance. As you might recall from previous conversation, we weren't aware of the opportunity for the TIF. But we're very, very happy that you're considering it at this point, as the project is still under construction. And we think it'd be very helpful to our cause there with the TIF. Now, to give you an idea of exactly what we did there, our architect, David Langley, is here, and he has a little bit of a presentation that he would like to add some pictures to the conversation, if we may. And I don't think that would take very much of your time, but I think there's been a handout, and I might just let him go ahead and talk to what we started with. The option was to continue with what we started with. But as we got into the project, we wanted to do an upgrade for the sake of the entire downtown area, especially with the visibility that this location has. That's when we asked David to take a look at it for us and see what it might take to take what had become a rundown facility, the building, the landscape and all, as the previous operation was pretty much going out of business and shutting down. We thought about going in and just moving the signage on over. It had been a restaurant, a pizzeria, Pizza Hut. And we thought that we'd go on in, do some cosmetic upgrades, paint the outside. And as we operated there, maybe do upgrades to the landscape and what have you. But fortunately, with Mr. Langley's help, we were able to come up with a plan that we thought would improve the property to the status that it should have, given what we want to see there in the downtown area. So David, would you want to go ahead and talk a little bit to what we?
And David, just one technical note, they have your images you sent me yesterday in the back that they can put on the screens for.
Excellent.
Yes.
I think that's very good. Yeah, wanted to offer the David Langley, architect, resident and business in Woodland Park. The Melvicks had come to me and offered to engage me in the architecture for this building, with the point that we don't want it to look like the old Pizza Hut anymore. We're looking for an improvement and some other points and guidelines. They wanted it to be a quality facility in the entrance to Woodland Park. I early on pointed out to them that this is going to be a new landmark item, whatever you do in the city of Woodland Park because of its location and visibility. As a reminder to you, in this package is what the Pizza Hut looked like at its very new time, not its old dilapidated time. We totally went for the transformation into something that has character appropriate to Woodland Park, including the Woodland Park design guidelines that I'm totally aware of. As Karen had mentioned, they are broad but well intended. That so the point of these pictures is that it is by the Melvix investment as well as my design, and a mission accomplished for that to the benefit of the city of Woodland Park as well as their business. This the first pictures there is a point of, we've got the reminder for you. You have all seen it. You have all seen it under construction. But a point that what it looks like from some simple snapshots I took yesterday, the quality it appears, as well as then the lower right-hand corner, the first sheet there, it was the first architectural model on that. So it's totally a design inspiration that lived up to its character and reality. I put on the second sheet as a reminder for what they'd put into the site development. We had a site there and drainage that had to be taken care of, contributing by the city, drainage across the street, interfacing with the exit drainage on Highway 24, and as well then the other landscape standards to be left up to. So those points there is, that was looking like rubble and weeds when the Melvix bought it. So they've done a great deal of work to dress it up and be a quality appearance. This, of course, is not even what it'll come to be alive as the green season comes and things start to grow. The last piece is simply the architectural model that we originated with this. You can see the design intent request from the Melvix and their investment. There's very little difference from design through the actual completion to it. A little stain color, and that's about it. Difference to that really is to the site, the civic improvements that were brought alive by their work on the extra landscaping qualities that they invested in. Therefore, I totally believe that this is well deserving of the DDA support and any benefit that it can give them as an example of an improvement to the city.
Thank you, Mr. Langley. Any questions from the board, from Mr. Langley or the applicants so far? So I think, with one-on-one discussions with the board, emphasizing one-on-one discussions with other board members, I think these 3 bullet points, I think, unless I hear to the contrary, we're kind of in concurrence, because as a public body, we do have to be conscious of, are we going to open up a can of worms and have other buildings who have done projects without asking for a TIF come back at us and ask for a post facto, if you will, TIF agreement. I think what we talked about last time of we would be interested in maybe discussing the public improvements, not all the beautiful things you've done with the actual building. At least that was the original discussion. That may have changed. And then the fact that it's not quite complete yet. So, but they are close. We do not want to hold them up in their business. And so I think today we need to come to some kind of agreement whether we can support some kind of TIF reimbursement agreement based on the fact that they haven't completed their CEO, based on the fact of maybe the public improvements, and there may be board members that want to include more than just the public improvements. So we need discussion. So I think in the interest of trying to get germane feedback from every board member. Let's just go in order to make sure that we gather everyone's thoughts so that we can maybe intelligently make a decision, hopefully today, on setting a direction.
Tony, may I add one more thing?
Go up to the mic, please.
I'm sorry, guys. Can you guys hear me okay?
Mhm.
I just wanted to stress, I'm not done yet. I want to do a lot more to that location. We have some dreams and so forth of things we really want to do to decorate that up for public appearance. As time goes on, you'll see that I'll keep going with this. I just wanted to share that with everybody.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bourne.
Thank you. As far as the inclusion, I can certainly feel very comfortable with the various line items that he has presented here as public facilities, because they are public facilities. The other one that might be a nice addition, and this would be the demolition, as that would encourage or at least give a positive stroke to the removal of old obsolete buildings and allow the generation of new safe structures as we move forward. So the $101,296 of public benefit, I'm comfortable with that. Some portion, whether it's total or a portion of demolition of $36,629, I could certainly see that as a addition to this.
Okay.
The rest of the stuff on this presentation, and as I look back on your estimate too, I guess I don't have the same comfort with the other items that are there. Because I'm focusing on that which is public, public safety and public vision.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, the breakdown, in light of our prior discussion, there's probably a few other things you could add in there, to tell you the truth. The more along the personal property line. So I'm good with it. I think it's a beautiful building. It adds to the lifestyle, the quality of our downtown. So I'm all for a TIF. What it would amount to, I think I wouldn't have a suggestion about that, but definitely on board for a TIF.
Thank you, Mr. Good. Mr. Gamelke.
I think Al brings up a good point with the demolition. It would encourage more people to possibly start all over. And I like that idea. It's an interesting idea. And I'm definitely a yes for the public improvements. It look really, the public facilities, it really looks nice. Really, and I can see they had to do a lot of extra work, but they probably were not expecting on that for sure.
Thank you, sir. For my chair, if we look back at our foundational plan, this obviously meets most of the checklist items of what the DDA is meant to do. I would argue that with the abandonment by Pizza Hut, that became a blighted property for our community, which is a big check mark on why the DDA was started in the first place. The challenging thing for me is the kind of like last minute thing. I buy that you didn't know about it because we're not necessarily great at communicating that as a board. I'm comfortable with the public improvements. And I had not considered the demolition, but that actually probably fits within the foundational plan too, in terms of the intent and the purpose and what we're trying to accomplish in the downtown corridor. The only thing I'm not sure about is I'm very interested in our attorney's perspective on doing a TIF agreement at this juncture, just to make sure there's nothing that we should know about before we proceed forward. I agree, Mr. Good, that if we were at the beginning and we were looking at the agreement in totality, we might be able to consider other components. I think at this juncture, I would have a hard time with that from a public perspective, but that's just me. I'm just one vote. So I'll pass it on to see if Mr. McCaskill would like to weigh in or not. You don't have to.
Thank you, Chair Perry. I think I think if the board if there's a consensus to move forward with a TIF agreement, I believe we can do that. We would just be a matter of, making sure we're utilizing the current, the 2022 assessed value of the property that was payable in 2023. I'm not sure if is this the properties that owned by M&M Estate LLC? Is that
Yes, it
is
is.
that the single purpose entity that was formed for the property? So I mean, I think that if we're looking at the base value, I think we have that data. I can make sure we're working with city staff to know what that base value is. But sure, we could. If the majority of the board wants to move forward on that, I'll make sure that I'm helping to make that happen. So,
Mr. Maharis?
Sure. And I would just stress again that, we need to establish our criteria moving forward. And I think it's okay if we're going to make a change, but consistency should be one of the major goals of the board. And so what we include in TIF agreements, I think we all need to be able to provide the community a definitive answer on that aspect, because it seems to change project to project.
Ms. Anderson?
Well, I am very comfortable with the TIF agreement with including the public facilities. Because of how late in the game they're coming to the table, I don't know if I would be comfortable with adding personal property at this point. But because of the curb appeal and the beautification that it brings to our town, I am actually comfortable with adding more of the architectural exterior upgrades into the TIF agreement, more than just the demolition.
Can you point to something specific? Because if our intent is to give direction to pull together a TIF deal, then we need more specifics, and we're gonna have to maybe vote on some of the specifics. Okay.
I mean, I don't think design work would be a part of that because that's, conceptual. But I think that, your stonework and your stucco and your concrete, I mean, all of those kinds of things really do bring a lot of beautification to our city and how that building looks.
Okay.
And I've got a thought, maybe the architect could come forward and kind of give some thoughts on what is above and beyond what would be typical design that you incorporated into this structure because of its prominence and, their desire to provide a quality facility.
Very good point. It is very much a point of spending the time and providing a design quality that is very much above and beyond the minimum required to achieve a building permit, city approval, and the design aspect of this board hasn't been particularly active as far as what I've seen either. So this was very much an intent. The exterior appearance is very much a public improvement because it's all publicly seen consistently, constantly, and in this case, very apparent right on the entrance into downtown Woodland Park. To put it bluntly, they could have been, it was already a pizza restaurant. They could have moved in and started business, to exaggerate that point. That the dilapidated condition isn't necessarily a legal requirement for remediation. Totally good point of view to bring up the point of demolition, because that is a big part of the project to get started with in this case. Intent, like I said, was to go beyond the minimums for building permit and go towards something that creates an image that supports the character of downtown Woodland Park. The program was to increase the view, change the image, could have been just basically covering up what's there and putting a bunch of windows in it. He wanted to make a statement that is much more significant and really will be there in the foreseeable future in the city of Woodland Park. It's not just today, it is publicly seen, and it will be a quality statement that's there for the city of Woodland Park. To follow up with the design standards, kind of look at it. The design standards speak to using materials of stone, timber, and earth tones, very little else. There's not quantities put there. So the design tend on that to put way more than any stone would be, stone would be required, is big on it to put the heavy timbers in there. It says timber, but there's not a quantity specific. It could have been a 2x4 nailed up and be done. I think there's some quantity, some mention of roofing materials, but not very specific at all. So it's very minimal. We went way beyond that to exceed that simply for a quality of the public perception in the city of Woodland Park. Naturally, has been touched on here, the quality of that improves the marketplace. This is not a strictly marketplace driven quantity, but rather does address what is ideally achievable to address that marketability. I mean, it's quite simply that addresses a lot of other things that occurred to me, as part of what I wanted to see, but quite simply the AJ's logo in the middle of that gable comes out very tasteful and is very much an asset. It needed a sign. That's a marketing thing by design. So I'll be happy to try to answer any other questions. I'm in the business of pretty pictures, not speaking, but you see the intent, and I'll be happy to answer anything else.
Thank you, Mr. Langley. We'll go to Matt.
I had to go hit my button. Really good job, Dave. I've worked with Dave Langley before. It was really great to work with him. Does a great job. So it's a beautiful building. And I mean, I love what it does coming down the street, much better than looking at an old dilapidated Pizza Hut building. So, and I mean, maximizing the views from the structure for the enjoyment of the people who will go there and eat there. I mean, I can see many people during the summer. I can see that place being flooded with tourists eating, and which is going to be amazing for the owners of AJ's, I hope. But yeah, I'm on board with with helping with this. It is unfortunate that it came along so late, but thankfully don't have a CO yet on the project. And looking forward to seeing what we can do to possibly help, because I really think it's going to be something that contributes to our city and enhances the experience that people have when they come to our city, and locals that we have when we're living here. So,
Okay, Mr. Neal.
Let me just say up front, I would like to do something to try to help. I'm struggling with exactly what pieces would be justified. I don't have enough knowledge or experience with past TIFs, and maybe I need to get with Ms. Anderson and look at some of the other TIF agreements, find out what percentage or what amounts or how those were established in the past for other businesses. And then I'd like to kind of discuss it with some of, a couple of the other council members that have been around for a while to see what their knowledge is in terms of what past DDAs have granted and what has been acceptable to the citizens from the a city council perspective. So I guess to summarize, I do support something strongly. I do see the enormous value. I do believe it will become one of those landmarks in Woodland Park because it is very it's such an appropriate design for a mountain community that we want to kind of reward AJ's for taking the time to make it a mountain appearance. But I just want a little bit more information before I commit to what pieces we factor in terms of the amount. I've listened to each council member and I think they have valid points. I just would like a little bit more background, but you do have a commitment that there will be a vote to support something. And it won't be just some token amount. I just want to make sure it's an appropriate amount. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll add some additional comments and then maybe frame maybe the components of a potential motion to be brought by a board member into.
Tony, would I be able to get a comment before we, an additional comment before we vote?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so looking at and listening to all the discussion, it appears we have kind of a consensus to do something. It seems to have emerged into kind of three tranches, one being just the public facilities, two being the public facilities plus the demolition, and three being the public utility facilities, demolition, and possibly some of what's been described in the past boards as gingerbread, the pretty stuff. I do know that Tractor Supply was required to put some gingerbread up to make it more consistent. And so I think that was considered in the TIF discussion. To Mr. Maharis's point, Mr. Neal's point, we have started, just like we're going to do with Mr. Vassalotti on all the financial stuff, we have closed already to break them down into components to try to understand where we came from and where we are now in terms of what's been done in the past and put it, we're kind of putting it in kind of a grid, if you will, of different components that have been considered in the past. And I think that'll help inform us. I don't know that we may have a majority to choose one of these three modalities today, but I think what's most important today, in my opinion, is for us to have a motion that we are committed to working in good faith on a TIF reimbursement agreement with AJ's, that it could be one of the three different tranches or some combination. I think most importantly, that we have an agreement today that we're going to do that in good faith without holding them up on their CO. Because remember, we kind of we've all kind of, most of us have said the CO is important in terms of doing the TIF deal. So they're saying a week and a half, maybe. They're going to be hopeful. We'll say 3, maybe a month. The point is that we don't want to hold them up for opening for business. That would be not in anyone's best interest. But we also want to make sure that we do this right. Our attorney has some work to do here to make sure that we put together the right TIF agreement. So I guess what I would suggest is that we have a motion that we are committed in good faith to provide a TIF agreement to AJ's. And it sounds like the minimum is for the public facilities up to potential design elements, as Ms. Anderson suggests, based on gathering additional data, additional discussion by the board. Probably, the hard thing for me to understand is how to get to that differential between the basic city requirements versus what you did above and beyond? How do you figure that delta out? To me, I can't do that, but someone can, I'm sure. So I guess I would, rather than commit to one of the three modalities, I'm going to suggest that someone make a motion that we're committed to work in good faith to do a TIF agreement with AJ's that at the minimal, it'll probably be the public facilities, but it could be one of the other modalities that we're agreeing to that today to work in good faith so that we're not holding them up on the CO, since that was one of our de facto requirements. And I think we can leave it at that for today, in my opinion, but you know,
Can we not have discussion today and try to
no, that's what I'm saying.
come up with something now?
Oh, for a TIF
Did-
deal?
Yeah,
I.
like maybe if I could suggest, can I?
Well, so how this works is any member can make any motion and then we'll see if it passes. If it doesn't, then we can make another motion. We can have other discussions. So yeah, if you're ready to commit to one of the three modalities and you get a second, we get a majority vote.
I am.
Okay.
I feel like we drag stuff on a little too long.
Yeah, Mr. Green wanted to make one more comment.
Yeah, first off, I'd like to know if Mr. Langley would like to be a part of the design review for Woodland Station. That I think is a beautiful.
He is an artist.
Yeah,
That has been previously discussed. I actually did work under economic development and in conjunction with Tanner and Jan a little bit on it, so. Discussion, I think we should get back to that.
Yeah.
Make it a part of this.
yeah,
timing
no,
right now.
you hit the
but-
nail on the head with that.
Yeah.
So, but my comment is that on a typical TIF agreement, you have your increment, you got your base, your end result, the value of the building after you've done your improvements. And that's the increment. And basically what we normally do is we apply a percentage of how much we're going to include on that increment. I think there's a lot of rules and regulations that we might be stepping on toes if we start making up our own ways of doing it. I think our approach should be how much are we going to offer? Like, I think on Mr. Taylor's, it was 75%. If I'm, so we, as a board, should decide, well, do we want to go that high given the conditions, or do we want a little bit lower or something? But I think that's where we should be focusing on and not picking what we want to.
Okay, so I think once we have the matrix of all the previous TIF deals, that will inform us so we can make those kind of decisions. The other factor here is the life of the DDA ends in 2031. And so we are going to have some limitation there with respect to most of these TIF deals that we've reviewed have been 10-year deals. That is not possible now because we don't know if the DDA is going to be extended or not. And so we have to do a deal based on current situation. What I would suggest, Mr. Good, is that once we have the matrix of those TIF deals broken down so that we can easily see what's been done before, it's not that easy. Having read all those agreements multiple times, they're not necessarily consistent and it's not easy to parse through, but I think we're about 60% done with doing that. So I would say that it's premature to talk about 75%, 50%. If it's an 8-year deal, we may have to go 90% if we're going to try to get there to be reasonable to the applicant. I don't know. So the point is I don't know that we can do that today, but Mr. Gabelke wants to entertain a motion.
Well, point of information first.
Yes, sir.
I want to honor Mr. Gamelke's motion. The information I would like to know if somebody does have there is, do you have an actual breakdown? Unfortunately, I don't have the packet or the TIF request with me on this trip. do you have the numbers for the breakdown of the public, the demolition and the gingerbread in the TIF request packet before Mr. Gamelki makes his?
So take out your pen.
I've got it.
So the public benefit 101,296. The demolition 36,629. The total project 504,968.
I just sent him a picture of it.
Okay. John just sent
Thank
you a
you,
picture. Perfect.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Okay. So, Mr. Gamelki,
So I just don't want to keep dragging this on. If I can propose that we already talked about, we would approve or thought we would approve the public facilities. So I say that we do that. And then I say, I like Al's idea about the demolition. I don't think that we should cover all the demolition. I'm proposing that maybe we do half of the demolition costs. And to Mrs. Good, or excuse me, Mrs. Anderson, I would think anything that they did above and beyond as far as the improvements, that was a choice that they made. And great, I'm grateful for it, but I'm not so sure that at this point that we should reimburse those. So I'm comfortable, I'm proposing that we would as a tip deal that we would do $119,610.50, which is the total public improvement and half of the demolition. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. I'd like to move it forward if we can and not wait till another meeting.
okay, we have a first. Do we have a second?
Would that include a percentage?
Not at this point again.
I'll second that motion. I'm looking at the numbers, so I will second John Gamelki's because I don't want this to continue to drag on and on and on and on and on. We need a target.
Okay. We'll have discussion, but I will recognize Councilman Case because I suspect she can add value to our knowledge base.
And she happened to be the council member that I was referring to when I said I wanted to talk to other council members, because she does have experience in this area.
Thank you. I'd just like to share something, and it's part of the conversation that Mr. Good has brought up so far. What you're looking at as far as the cost of the improvements that you're considering, that would be the maximum reimbursement
Correct.
that would be reached based on those percentages each year and that calculation. That's the reason that you all are considering those things, is you do need to set a maximum so that it's not open-ended. And that's what those numbers are for.
Correct.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks for the clarification. I'm sorry. Okay, so we do have a first, we do have a second, so let's go down and have discussion.
Born, yes.
Well, no, we're doing discussion. If there's any, there may or may not be any.
Okay,
Any discussion?
no.
Mr. Good?
I'm all for a TIF. I'm not so sure I'm comfortable with John's proposal there. I think it should be a more traditional approach.
Jerry, could you elaborate just a little bit what you're thinking traditional?
Yeah, exactly.
By a percentage, if you've got 100,000 and your multipliers, what, do you know, Tony? Your multiplier on the TIF as far as their reimbursement. In any case, if we take, instead of offering him 75%, and you're saying because of the shortened year, maybe that would be 75% would still not be the maximum amount, but it would be appropriate to give them instead of breaking it down by breaking it totally down like it is. I think we've got, I would ask Mr. McCaskill if there are any guidelines that we would be breaking in doing it that way. It just seems kind of, it seems wrong to me.
Of course. Mr. Gamelki? Or comment?
No.
Mr. Ford?
Perhaps Jerry is mixing up this percentage. When the ad valorem tax is calculated, then a dollar figure comes out. In the past, the DDA has used 75% of that ad valorem tax that's collected that is given back to the individual. Not 75% of whatever these numbers here happen to be. So you've got a little, you're mixing those up.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful there. So roughly what John has come up with, somewhere in the vicinity of 160,000. That'll generate a certain amount of property tax, and that's what we calculate.
It was 119,610.50.
119. Oh, okay. I included, I guess, design works and some other
Yes.
stuff in. but-
Yeah, so my comments are, just to be clear, so TIFs in the past, we've seen 75% step down to 25%. So every deal is a little bit different. What Councilman Case pointed out, which is very germane, is that based on Mr. Gamelke's motion, the maximum amount of reimbursement would be 119,610.50.
Yeah.
Now, whether the reimbursement ever actually gets there is another question based on property values, setting that 2022 base value, future tax valuation, right? So, so what I would say is that if we approve this motion at that maximum amount, then the direction to the attorney will be to help us draft a TIF agreement that's legal, because we're going to do everything legal, Mr. Good, and make sure that it's consistent with what we've done in the past with TIF agreements. So whether it's 75, 50, 25, whatever, whether it's 90 because of the time frame, we have a shortened, I mean, so the bottom line is what on its face I've seen from previous TIF agreements is that it seems like the intent of previous boards was to give them a percentage back based on the valuation each year, with some coming back to the DDA, if you will. So not 100% deals. So I don't know whether we're there yet. So just know that if we approve this motion, that's the maximum reimbursement amount we're setting. We'll work with our attorney to come up with a strong TIF deal that we will bring back to this body for approval, and we can make adjustments at that time to the percentages. So it will be legal, I promise you that. But I don't know that we could set those values today, because I think we need to look at the numbers and remember, our first priority is to pay our Vectra bonds back. Our second priority is to pay the city of Woodland Park back. The third priority is to pay TIF reimbursements back to the applicants and to the parties. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
Mr. Perry, that is the reason historically why there was the 25% that was not returned out of each ad valorem tax collected each year. That was for administration and to do that work. The other 75% was then given to the applicant.
Right, that's what it appears.
Yeah.
At least on the surface from,
Yes.
as I'm still
based on
learning.
what is collected.
We'll jump to Mr. Maharis and we'll come back if you want to weigh in later.
And I kind of, I feel John's intent to try to get solutions sooner than we have as a board in the past. But I would like to consider specific aspects, you know, when I look at this design and what speaks to me is above and beyond, or probably the beams that was mentioned by the architect and the stonework and possibly the deck. And, you know, if we could nail down those costs, you know, because I assume this lumber package is all your lumber, just, you know, the structural lumber as well as the beams.
Yeah. Yes, I believe that'd be the case.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
it would be.
So, you know, I would be in support of separating that out for the, you know, the architectural features that were above and beyond. If we look at beams, we look at stonework, we look at the addition of deck, you know, those aspects, you know, on a first brush basis seem to be above and beyond what would be required for a typical installation, along with inclusion of the public facilities, which has been pretty consistent for this board.
Yes, so I definitely agree that, you know, the public facilities I'm okay with 50% of the demolition, but I do feel like the above and beyond gingerbread needs to be added in.
Mr. McCracken?
Yeah, I agree with Mrs. Anderson on that. They took very large steps to make sure that it was very mountainy and very, a very fitting woodland park structure. And I think that, that should be rewarded in some way.
Mr. Neal?
Yeah, it's interesting. John, I appreciate the number that you came up with. It's actually a little lower than what I was thinking, because I do like the public facilities amount. And then what three of you have already stated, the above and beyond, which would be the metal roof system, the stonework, and that portion of the lumber package. So the 119, 610.50 is the lowest that I would go. I think they should be compensated for doing that above and beyond. But in the interest of getting a minimum voted on, if Mr. Gamelke does not modify his motion to bring it up a little bit, I will still support his 119,610. But I would actually go a little higher, almost to the $200,000 level, because of the above and beyond plus public work. Thank you.
Do you want to amend your motion, Mr. Gamelke?
Well, I just feel like they're approaching it so late in the game. I feel like the fact that we're giving anything and considering anything is pretty big of us.
Fair
Just-
comment. Fair comment, John.
I kind of guess that's where I'm at. If this would have been proposed to us in the very beginning, we could have looked at all those numbers. I feel like we would be a different number. So I guess that it's not that I'm penalizing you. I'm not saying that. Just saying this point of the game, I feel like that's a fair number. If somebody else wants to propose a different number, I'm open to that. But that's the number that I would propose.
Yeah, so to be clear, we have a motion and a second on your motion as presented. Now, remember, it's not a personal slight. Like if this motion gets approved
Correct.
or not approved, it's not a personal slight. There may be differences of opinion, which
Sure.
I'm hearing here. And so, but we do need to call for the question as presented, which is basically a motion to approve a TIF reimbursement, working in good faith with the attorney to come up with an agreement that works for the DDA, works for the applicant, with a maximum reimbursement of 110,610.50. That is the motion.
119,610.
I'm sorry, let me put my glasses on. 119,610.50. And so I guess you have one more comment, Mr. Bourne?
What we could do, I think it's with the Roberts Rule of Order, is that a motion could be made to amend the first motion. Then we vote on that amendment motion, which then changes the original, then we can vote on that.
I haven't had a bathroom break. Let's just vote on the first one, then let's make a new motion if we want.
No.
You want to follow Roberts?
Yeah,
Okay.
council, help me.
Well, Al is correct.
Al is
we have
correct.
a motion on the table. If
So-
you needed to change it, it would be a secondary motion to a different number. You vote on that, and then if it fails, then you go back to the original number.
Correct.
Okay,
That is correct. There can be a motion to amend the motion on the floor.
Right,
But right now, we only have the one motion
yeah.
okay.
on the floor.
So,
I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion.
yes, Mr. McCracken, and what is that amendment?
I would like to make an amendment to amend, or a motion to amend that motion and find somewhere in between. And honestly, Al mentioned it earlier, even though he had the number wrong, but I'm thinking we find a number somewhere in the 160 range. And then we're not going to the full 200,000, but we're also giving them.
May I offer a piece of information? Because I did some addition while you were speaking.
Mhm.
If you take the 101,296, which is the original public, add the stonework, and add the metal roof,
Mm,
your total number comes up to 173,549, and that would exclude the timber. But it would bring it up to a little bit higher, closer to what you're saying, the 160, and it gives you a solid number that you can have a supporting document to align with. So 173,549 might be what you want to adjust the motion to.
Okay, 173,549.
Yes,
Okay, I'm good with that number. So
I
that
will-
would be the number
I
I
will
would like to go with.
second Matt's motion of amending the number to 173,549.
okay. Any discussion on the amendment?
That's what I got.
I would second the amendment.
Well, no, we already have a first and a second.
Oh, we do.
Any discussion?
You could third it out.
I have a little bit, so I did some math. In the way I'm looking at it, I added in demolition, I added in 20% of the lumber package to include those beams. I added the stonework. I added half the concrete for the inclusion of the patio, and I added half the railing for inclusion of the patio. And so the number I came up with for their total curb appeal upgrades was 109,526 for a total of 210,822. So I think we're narrowing that range, you know, somewhere in that range is where
We're double.
I'm comfortable.
I'll see how that's narrow. It's double.
Okay, so we have an amendment to the original
Tony,
motion.
Tony, the way.
No, this is
Robert's
just
rule-
discussion.
I know.
I
Okay,
believe you can't have a sub amendment to a sub
I
amendment.
agree, I
Yeah,
agree.
I think, Chairman Perry, let's get a vote on the motion to amend.
Yes,
And if that passes or fails, then
we could go from there. I agree. But we still need further discussion, right? If there's anything else.
further discussion is always appropriate.
Yes. So anyone else want to weigh in on the amendment to the original motion? By the way, I did buy the Robert's Rules for Dummies, but I really don't want to open it. Okay, any other comments? Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and vote on the amendment to the original motion that is brought forward by Mr. McCracken, seconded by Mr. Neal. Mr. Bourne,
And the clarification is that's for the 173.
correct.
Born, yes.
Good, yes.
I feel pressured.
No, don't feel pressure.
Gamelki, no.
Perry, no.
Mijares, yes.
Anderson, yes.
Mr. McCracken,
McCracken, yes.
Neil, yes.
okay, so the amendment to the original motion passes.
Oh, excellent. It's majority, it's democracy, baby.
So just to clarify for my notes, that's establishing the maximum reimbursement obligation.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I'm doing-
Yeah.
Thank you.
What was
Get
that?
that number again?
173,549.
Okay.
Yep.
And thank you, Mr. Gamelki, for kicking us in the pants to get something decided.
Thank you for being willing.
Now we get to vote on the original motion with the new number.
That's correct.
Okay. So, Mr. Warren,
Yes.
Good, yes.
Gamelki, yes.
Perry, yes.
Mijares, yes.
Anderson, yes.
McCracken, yes.
Neil, yes.
Woo-hoo. All right.
I want to thank you very much. We're very grateful that you went to the extent that you did to hear our request. And we hope to really be a good influence on that whole stretch of the community there.
I'm
That's
just
our
waiting to
goal.
eat there. Let's go.
Yes,
Yes, hopefully within a couple of weeks.
Mr. Bourne.
Just might want to bring forward for the applicant here that the dollars will not actually start to flow until after ad valorem tax, real property tax has been collected.
Okay.
So this is going to be sometime in the future. It's not something that happens now.
I think I understand.
And then that'll be probably about a 75% each year of the tax that's collected. That's relative to this.
I see, I see.
I also want to add that our intentions are to continue to go. We, like the little sign says, this was our way of saying thank you to the town of Woodland Park. Love you guys. You guys are really successful for the last 10 years. These assistance will go into the business account that goes to developing the property further. We've got rings of bronze statues, anything to really make it pop, that's just something to work hard. So with those decisions in mind, I hope over the years you guys will see what we intend to do with that spot. We really want to go more. We want to go further.
Great. So we're gonna have to be very responsive to each other in the weeks ahead. We're gonna need certification from the engineers on all the costs. We need to get those nailed down to make sure that we have a supporting documentation. We will come up with a draft reimbursement agreement in the interest of open discussion. We'll share that draft with you, but it still needs to come back to the DDA for formal approval in its final form. And that will line out a lot of elements, as Mr. Good suggested, the reimbursement schedule, 75%, 50%, whatever that we decide on that. And so, yeah, so if you will, just make sure that you get us all the information request right away so that we're not held up in supporting you. Okay.
Okay, so we've got the contact information that you need for us. We'll be waiting to respond to anything that you need.
Great. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very
Thanks so
much.
much.
Yep.
Okay. So I think, except for C, the next couple of things will go fairly quick, but does anyone need a break?
Yes, yes.
I do, I'm sorry. So let's just take a 5-minute break. So let's get back at 9:40 and go. I warned everyone it's gonna be a long one.
This might be a 4-hour meeting.
Whew. Really? We'll wait for the attorney.
Kelly's patient, she's sticking it out.
Travel agents are industry.
Okay. I think we'll reconvene. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I think the next couple should be straightforward. The third will be more interesting. Then we'll have final reports and be out of here. So one of the things you noticed on this agenda is resolutions. So it's a concept that our attorney recommended, which we completely support. Takes us to another level of doing everything properly, which has been our intent. Every step of the way is to constantly improve, fix our mistakes, document processes, those kind of things. So 7A under new business, consideration of resolution number 01, series 2023. And just so you know, the nomenclature there, the resolution number 1, that means that's the first resolution this body has ever made. And then series 2023 denotes the year that it was made. So as we go through, if we do other resolutions, there'll be 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. The attorney will help us discern whether it's resolution worthy or motion worthy, but these two are resolution worthy. And so the first is in 2019, the Colorado legislature did a House bill that basically eliminated the requirement for physical postings of meetings if the meeting was posted on the website, which these are posted on the city website. And so this first resolution is basically to remove that requirement. But I also think that Mr. McCaskill appropriately recommended that we have a backup of posting at City Hall if something happens to the internet, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, what a lot of local governments will do is because obviously the legislature wanted to move toward having public notices of meetings posted on websites because those are considered to be more available than having a member of the community come down and have to look at the front door of City Hall. But what a lot of local governments in Colorado have done is to say, look, we realize that there might be the website might be down or there might be a power outage or something. And so it's always smart to have a backup, right? So that's why we've retained the backup posting location, which would be here at City Hall.
That is awesome.
But this resolution is required because the open meetings law in Colorado does require each local government to annually designate its official posting location for meeting notices. And that's what we're doing here is making sure that it's clear that it's the city website and specifically the DD8 subpage of that website that is the official posting location for meeting notices. Of the
Right.
DDA.
And so it's also a tickler item similar to what the city does. So we need to do this every year. We kind of need to reauthorize this every year, correct?
That's correct. It'll be a resolution that is presented for approval every year, probably at the first regular meeting of each calendar year.
Thank you, sir. So,
And Chairman Perry,
yes,
I just want to add that this is actually exactly what the city council at the most recent council meeting just approved for the city. So this is now matching both the action that the city had to take, which was our annual approval of where things are posted, and the method and locations now matches what the city has.
thank you, sir. So I would entertain a motion to approve resolution number 1, series 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 1, series 2023, designating the public place for posting of notices of regular and special meetings of the authority.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Miharis. Any discussion? Mr. Bourne?
The question that I have, and this may be minutia that is worthless, but maybe legal counsel, how do we address these? We've been using the word motion. This is a resolution. Do we use the word resolve or resolution, or is motion equivalent? And this is just,
I think it's a motion to approve the resolution.
how do we best address that?
That's a great question. A motion to approve the resolution is appropriate.
Is
Uh,
appropriate?
Yeah,
Okay,
and really, a resolution really doesn't have any more legal impact than a motion does. But what a resolution is helpful, instead of having a member of the public or a member of staff or a consultant have to go back and dig through meeting minutes to figure out what motions were made, it's a lot easier to go back and find resolutions. So whenever there's any official action that the DDA board takes, then my preference is to memorialize that in a resolution,
That's a
because
resolution.
it's easier from a record keeping perspective to go back and search the resolution.
I just didn't want to have a weak spot in the mix.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that, good question, but motion to approve the resolution is.
It's appropriate.
That's
Okay,
correct.
good.
Okay, so any other discussion before we vote? Hearing none, seeing none, Mr. Bourne?
Born, yes.
Good, yes.
Jamelke, yes.
Perry, yes.
Mijares, yes.
Anderson, yes.
McCracken, yes.
Neil, yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Okay, the second one, in your packet, you have a clean version of the new bylaws and then a red line version that Mr. McCaskill provided so that it was easier for you to discern the changes to the previous bylaws. And remember, what we had requested of Mr. McCaskill was to basically go through and bring our bylaws up to 2023 standards. And I think he did an awesome job and even contemplated something that's going to be very helpful, but I hadn't even thought of, which is the ability to do e-signatures. And that's very helpful when it comes to expense reimbursements, possibly TIF reimbursements, where we can get those signatures through a remote mechanism into the city to keep us from having to drive around and meet up with each other in different ways. So I appreciated that addition I hadn't even considered. But I think he did an excellent job. I think the bylaws are very well done, more clear, and I would entertain a motion to approve resolution number 2, series 2023.
Born would move to approve the resolution number 02 series 2023.
Do we have a second?
Anderson will second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, don't we need some time to review this a little bit or?
Did you get the packet yesterday at noon?
No.
Yeah,
You got an email.
Rebecca emailed it to you.
It's later in the afternoon. I've got to figure out how to get it hooked up to my cell phone.
Ah.
But so I have to go into work to check for it, and we were closed.
Yeah, and Mr. Good, I'd recommend yourself as well as the public. You can actually go to the city site and sign up for email notifications. And what that would have done is you can actually go to the city site and download the packet there because it was available at the same time. So I think it's valid if you did not access it for because you hadn't accessed that email, because I agree it's difficult to get to a computer sometime. It's easier when it's on a phone, but I guess I would prefer getting a motion and then at the next meeting, if Mr. Good finds anything that he has concerns with, we can readdress it at that juncture.
Yeah, I would agree, Tony, because there is a motion. It's been seconded.
Yeah.
I will add that, you know, I did work with Chairman Perry with Mr. McCaskill. And I think it was an outstanding job what he did, updating it, because there were some things in there that, well, like Chairman Perry said, we had not thought about or gave them direction. So the research was done on other bylaws from other DDAs, apparently or obviously, that our attorney thought of those things and added to it and proposed to us so we could review them. And I thought they were very good suggestions. So I really do like the new bylaws as written.
Yeah, and I'll add that page 2 of the bylaws, page 62 of the packet. Another thing that Mr. McCaskill added was kind of definition of the officers and the roles, how to resign, those kind of things. Again, the red line version, if you haven't had a chance to go through it, I would recommend going through the red line version first, because that'll help expedite your review. But other than that, I will call for the question. And again, as with everything on this board, Mr. Good, that if you find something material that you think really should be addressed, we can take that up at the next meeting once you've had time to thoroughly review. But I'm going to assume that the other board members have done, have had access and have made their decisions. So, Mr. Bourne.
Born, yes.
Good abstain.
Yamalki, yes.
Perry, yes.
Mijares, yes.
Anderson, yes.
McCracken, yes.
Neil, yes.
Okay. So C is going to require a little bit more discussion. I think it goes back to an earlier comment that Mr. Good made regarding executive session. So I want to be clear that when I was asked to consider being chair, there were some tenets that I clearly stated from my perspective. For instance, as chair of the DDA, as long as I'm chair, I do not want to sanction or participate in any DDA initiated executive sessions. I think it has only led to negative stuff in the past, and there is nothing that this body will do, in my opinion, from a DDA side perspective, that warrants going behind closed doors. That said, this was a recommendation from our attorney, which I can let him speak on it, of course, but basically, it is not atypical when you're negotiating agreements to want to do that in some cases in an executive session so that there's more free flow of ideas and thoughts, especially frankly, I don't consider this a political board. I think we're a bunch of adult persons up here doing the best we can to make the best decisions we can for what we're charged to do. When we get to the city council level, it becomes more political. It becomes other elements that frankly, I don't want to even contemplate. And so I don't think it's inappropriate for the city council to request an executive session to have this discussion. I think the intent is to allow all of the city council members to weigh in relative to the draft agreements that we just approved earlier. It also allows Tava possibly to come and present directly to the council to let them know exactly what they're doing and where they're at and what they're wanting to accomplish. And it allows DDA representation there because our job is to advocate for getting the deal done and to getting the property sold and getting the property developed. So it's really a city council executive session, not a DDA executive session. I'll let Mr. McCaskill speak to this particular motion as to why you think it's appropriate, and then we can discuss.
So would you like me to comment on the the motion that's in the packet, or just comment on the executive session component?
Probably both, because you know, the motion basically is authorizing the chair and the treasurer to sit in on that meeting and to weigh in on that meeting and to at least in principle, agree with whatever they come up with. I think that's the intent, but whatever you want to, you want to share, sir.
Sure. So I guess just again, by way of background, the original 2009 disposition and development agreement for this property specifically contemplates and quite frankly, it's directly in compliance with state law, which also says that, you know, any sales contract or any development agreement for property has to be approved by city council as well. So in my previous discussions with the city attorney, we thought it prudent to make sure that city council was brought into the loop on all of the current discussions and the plan for the Woodland Station property. And the executive session is scheduled, I believe, for the next city council meeting, which is February 16th. And I believe that that has been placed on the agenda. So one of the, I think, main purposes of this motion is just to make, just make sure that the board, the majority of the board is comfortable with having the treasurer, Ms. Anderson and Chair Perry be the two designated representatives of the DDA to participate in that executive session in order to ensure that city council has adequate background in terms of what is proposed for the project in terms of making that decision. So.
And I would also like to point out, if you look in your packet on page 78, I would ask that if you haven't read it already, that you take a moment and just go through it, because this kind of outlines kind of some position statements. And what I will say is Mr. McCaskill provided it in this form, and I think it's an excellent representation of what we're trying to accomplish and kind of the general parameters of how we move forward with the city. So if you'll take a moment for that.
And Chair Perry, I'd like to also point out for those that when they got the packet, there was a draft that was provided by the chairman, which is pretty straightforward, simple sentences that our attorney did go in and add quite a bit of language. And that's when you look at the red line document, you can see the additional thoughts that were contributed by the attorney, just to make sure everything was thought through completely for when or if we make a motion on this, that it does have our attorney's embedded thoughts and contribution.
Yeah, I would say that Mr. McCaskill made it an excellent document.
Yes.
Okay.
Looking for comments, Tony?
Well, we're gonna ask for a motion first, then you can say whatever you want, Mr. Good. All right. Based on body language, I think we're through the documents. Mr. Bourne, you are a thorough reader, I know. Okay, so I guess the only question I have here, Mr. McCaskill, is with respect to Mr. Mijares, is this a motion that all we're advancing is negotiating on the contract? We're not approving the contract. The city council is going to do that. Can Mr. Mijares weigh in here, or should he continue to abstain?
I think right now, we're just looking for board input on whether or not you as the chairman and Treasurer Anderson will be authorized to participate in the executive session. I think it would be appropriate for Mr. Mijares to weigh in on that. I think it's very clear that he has announced his conflict of interest with respect to this project, and as he stated on multiple occasions, he won't be voting on the ultimate conveyance agreement between the DDA and the Taba Group.
Great, thank you, sir. So I guess I would entertain a motion.
I'll make,
Authorize the chair and treasurer.
I'll make a motion to approve the authorization of the chair and the treasurer to participate in the Thursday, February 16th executive session and future executive sessions with city council if necessary to discuss terms and conditions of proposed conveyance of Woodland Station property to Taba Group.
Do we have a second?
I will second.
Okay, now discussion. We'll start with Mr. Bourne.
I'm comfortable.
Okay.
With as presented, yeah.
Well, transparency. Why at this juncture is it important to have a closed meeting with the city council, who I might argue, there could be an argument that maybe they're at this point shouldn't be involved because the city is under directive from City Charter 917 to not offer incentives to development in town. So by giving them, letting them dictate at this point, I feel that probably is an issue that they have to take up. But and then why would it only include 2 members of the board? The whole board should be at this executive session. Never seen it otherwise.
Mr. McCaskey.
There's a couple of reasons why it's only 2. I think we wanted to avoid having to post the February 16th city council meeting as also a special meeting of the Downtown Development Authority. To my knowledge, there are no incentives that the city will be considering with respect to this project. And I'll just add that an executive session with the city council under 4024E is extremely appropriate in the circumstance because city council is ultimately going to need to give clear direction to the city attorney and the city manager in terms of how to move forward to finalize the development agreement contemplated for this site. Again, the original 2009 disposition and development agreement, as well as state law, requires city council to approve this proposed, approve the proposed conveyance of this property to the Taba Group. So the DDA board cannot move forward with that conveyance unless and until the city council has weighed in on that.
And that makes total sense. I understand that, but theirs is to approve or disapprove, but not to construct the agreement and or help construct it. And I still don't see for the matter of posting, I say we post it so that it is allowed to have everybody participate in that.
Hey, Josh.
Can I make a statement, then you can fine. So I want to be clear on page
Okay, cool. We
78.
got through that list.
Yeah, on page
All right,
78,
that
why,
sounds great. How'd that door, there wasn't anything wrong with that door, right? That's set fine.
hey, Matt,
He's working.
he's working. Page 78, I want to be clear that on this page, we're laying out kind of the DDA's position. I believe that Ms. Anderson and myself at that meeting will be as a resource there for the attorneys, for the city council, to answer any questions. They may come back and ask about how we chose the applicant in the first place. Don't know. And so it is their process in Anderson and I really, other than providing as much information as we can, as factually as we can, really, we're not in that process. This is a city council process because they're gonna come back and say, this is what, as a council, we think we'll agree to bring for vote in front of the public. So I have a great aversion to illegal past meetings of this board. I have a great aversion to illegal executive sessions of this board. And so, but I think it's appropriate in this situation. You know, frankly, we talked about getting an agreement done with that group in August. I think the interest rates have gone up 3% since then. You know, something to think about when you're doing business. So I think this is an appropriate process. The attorneys will be guiding, I suspect, both the city and all the development agreements, because there are a lot of nuances to that the attorneys have to do to make this proper for the public, proper for the city, proper for city council. And this is really their forum. We've already said in principle, here's our draft agreements. We're pretty much on the same page. You guys figure out your piece of it and let's get this done. That's what we're doing here. So, Mr. McCaskey, anything you want to add?
The only thing I would add, and maybe this is for Mr. Good for your benefit, I mean, one of the things that we need to talk about with the city council as well is not necessarily the proposed conveyance to the Tata Group, but we also need to discuss some potential amendments to that 2009 agreement, right? Because what I think was contemplated back in 2009 is not exactly what's being contemplated today, right? Things change over time. So it's a matter of getting some clear direction from city council in terms of what amendments to that agreement may make sense. So.
Yeah, Tony, I don't think you answered my question clearly, though, why the rest of the board can't attend this.
Well, I guess so we have a motion to authorize the chair and treasurer. What I don't know, is it if Mr. Good wants to make an amended motion saying that all DDA board members can participate in that process, is that appropriate? Would this, I mean, I don't know what the city council's perspective is on that. I'm not sure.
Is it a closed meeting? It's an
Well,
executive.
point of order.
Yes, sir.
Since I will be at that meeting, then you do have 3 DDA board members. And I know that when we first had this conversation with our attorney, it was going to be yourself, and then myself as a city council liaison in the city council role. But I think the discussion evolved to it would be wise to have the treasurer sit in there for this. So that does make it 3 DDA members. So we don't have any challenges down the line with a violation of open meetings. I think it should be posted. It will be a city council executive meeting as well as a DDA executive meeting, simply because there are 3 of us present. And I would just like the attorney to provide some thoughts on that statement.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. I'll take that into consideration, and I'll probably check in with the city attorney on that as well. I mean, I think you're sitting into that you're participating in that meeting as a council member and not necessarily as the DDA liaison, but let me confirm with the city attorney on that.
And I think what's important is then that we could get back to Mr. Good, if it actually becomes a DDA after you do your research, then we can go back and establish whether it would be a full open to everybody on the DDA.
Well, and I would argue that Mr. Good can posit an amendment to the motion that all members of the DDA attend the executive session. Now, I don't know.
Can
Can attend. So if Mr. Good wants to make that amended motion, then if we get a second, then we could vote on that and go through the process we did earlier. So it's up to you.
Yeah, being set up, aren't they?
No.
No, it's not being set up.
Robert's rules, remember?
Yeah, this is the proper process and you have a right to communicate your desire.
All right, I would like to make a motion to amend the motion that would allow the entire DDA board to attend this executive session.
Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a second to the motion. We will, any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, we will vote on the amended motion. Mr. Bourne,
Born, no.
Good, yes.
Gamelke, yes.
Perry, no.
Anderson, no.
McCracken, no.
Neil, no.
The motion fails. Now we will vote on the original motion. Mr. Bourne,
Born, yes.
Good, no.
Gamelke, yes.
Perry, yes.
Anderson, yes.
McCracken, yes.
Okay. Okay, the motion carries. Now, what I want to make clear is the intent of the DDA participation at this meeting is we're not there making any decisions. We're just there as a resource to potentially answer any questions. I would actually prefer, if possible, to get any questions ahead of time so we can provide a packet to the city council, and I would prefer not to even speak at that meeting, frankly. It's their meeting, so that's how it will be handled, and we will move forward. So is there any public comment regarding new business? Anyone online? I think the room wants to go home and take a nap. Okay, so we're gonna go to number 9, reports. So you'll also notice that this kind of follows what the city does in terms of reports at the end of the meeting. I will say that I may flip it because I like going last, so I may flip it and make the board chair report last, but I'll start today. So the board report, the chair report, the purpose of 9C is similar to council. If there's something that any board member wants to communicate in succinct fashion, hopefully, that's your opportunity to do so. And then D, when the attorney is present, he can weigh in on anything that he would like. So we'll start with the board chair report. I'm going to go back to the Downtown Development Authority page under the city website, and you'll see it up there on the screen. And for those at home, when you click on View DDA Documents, and this is a slow, laborious process, you'll see that there are folders and subfolders. This is where we're tracking documents, and over time, this will be populated more and more and available to the public on demand. I will say that in the last several weeks, we've had 2 core requests from former DDA Treasurer Coy. And if you go to the city site, the intent is this new process is that when a core request comes in, we technically, and this is a state statute, I don't know the exact citation, that we have 3 business days starting the day after the request to respond to the quorum. So what you're going to see in this 2023-01-18 request from Mr. Coy is his original request, basically a PDF of his email. You'll see any other emails that were pertinent. You'll see the response to satisfy the core request. And you'll notice that typically when DDA are putting documents up, we're trying to put the date at the beginning. That makes it more sortable for the public and kind of a practice that we've employed. So the original core request is here, core requests, record request COI 01-28-23. He also did one on 2024. And what you'll see is you have access, the public has access to what he asked, how we responded, all the materials, the interactions. And that's going to be our process moving forward. We'll get that documented so that future boards can follow the same process if they desire. And I want to add that these are the first two core requests that the DDA has received in its current constituted board. I want to be very clear that we are a volunteer board. We've spent a ton of time working on processes, working on clarity, working on getting things organized, working on making things more aligned with the city, more professional. We are a quasi-governmental entity under the city, which is why we're now embedded. And I know some previous board members did not trust the city, and that is not this board's position. And so core requests are appropriate and fine, and have no concerns with them. I am aware that former DDA Treasurer Coy has been putting in requests to the county treasurer as well. And all I'll say to that is it is welcome, because anything that illuminates an area that we can improve, that where maybe this board, present or past, has made a mistake that we need to remedy, we're 100% open. There are no hidden agendas up here. And so anyone in the public that notices something we're doing that can be improved, we're completely open to that, period. And we'll continue to improve. I think it's going to take another couple of months to shake out a few of these other processes. For instance, I think we're going to come up with we're going to be able to establish good boundaries for potential future TIF deals. I think we're going to better understand what that means. The AJ's request is going to force us to do some TIF training sooner than later, since we're about to engage that process, or we are engaged in that process. The documents themselves, if you go to under TIF agreements, these are all the TIF agreements that have been done in the history of the DDA. So the public and this board can go back and we're working hard behind the scenes to make a grid to kind of understand what we've done before. But anyone can do that. Meetings, the packets will be in here, the meeting minutes will be in here. The document archives, we're working on, and it's not as simple as copying it over, getting the original intact thumb drive from former DDA Treasurer Coy posted up here. Apparently there's some question on whether it all can be pushed into the public. I don't really know what the concern is yet, but that has been postulated. The only other thing I will say with regards to the TIF deal is that one of the other tenets when this body elected me as chair that I advocated for was that any future TIF deals, including AJ's, not include monies that were originally intended to go to the fire district. And the argument was that fire is the #1 risk to our community. We've approved some deals over the years where we've put more pressure on the fire department to support the downtown district with respect to protecting the downtown district, but they got no additional monies. What I will say, and what the attorneys will say is, okay, that's a great theory that you want to do that, but what we have to do there is get with Chief Tyler, get with Chairman Gomes from the fire district, and I'm committed to working with both of them to go speak with the other 5 districts that are part of, we take monies away from other districts, we being the DDA. And so to effectively be able to do what we've been talking about with the fire district, we're going to have to get concurrence from those other districts that they're okay with it, that they're not going to come back and cry foul later. And I'm not saying that we're going to be successful there, but we're going to work hard to make the case, to make the argument to those other districts that it's appropriate, that it's in the best interest of everyone, and it doesn't materially impact them more than they've already been impacted. But we have to do that now because we have AJ's coming. So if we're gonna do that, we have to do that now. Now, I will tell you that even though that's a strategy, I've also been aware that, you know, one of those districts could say no, and then we cannot do that. We won't be able to offer that as part of a future TIF agreement. In that case, I have personally committed to working with Chief Tyler and frankly, all the other fire districts in our community, in the county, and even down to Cascade, to come up with a coalesced solution to solving or improving our shared problems and concerns. Councilperson Case has been the lead advocate for that. Mr. Gamelke has been participating in that. And so we are going to take a run at getting these other districts to agree. Hopefully they will. Hopefully they'll buy the argument. If they don't, we're going to put other efforts in to work to protect the community. So that's the end of my report for today. So we'll go to Ms. Anderson.
Well, point of information to your report, Chairman.
Mm-hmm.
Since we are being hit with core requests on several documents, I, as the secretary, want to point out that the memory sticks that we did receive have absolutely no records of the DDA lawsuit that occurred back in 2016. And I would like your thoughts on having the city attorney, our DDA attorney, reach out to the previous custodian, demanding the documents that are they belong to the DDA. They are client attorney privileged documents. They should, in fact, in my opinion, be turned over to the DDA should some future core request come in regarding that lawsuit. We have nothing. It's like it never existed in what was turned over to us. Your thoughts?
Are you asking my thoughts directly?
Correct. I am asking your thoughts whether we should consider directing the DDA attorney to reach out properly and demand those records be turned over to us.
Well, what I will say initially is that, you know, I am putting great effort into getting all of the DDA documents organized, and on its face, I agree with you that I'm seeing big holes. For instance, the financial information, it's my understanding, was in a QuickBooks file that we can't put our hands on because the DDA did their accounting outside of the city's purview, even though it was still under the city for all the real purposes of how the DDA operates. So I guess I would say on its face, I agree with you. Our job as a current DDA, previous DDAs, is to make sure that we're doing good for the public. And I think that also includes making sure that we have all of the documents that belong to the public available for current or future core requests. So I agree in principle. I'm not really sure from a legal perspective what it takes.
Chairman Perry, let me expand one thought also. I never expected that I would ever be sued. Just by being a council member, you find yourself liable for things that you have absolutely no knowledge simply because you're a council member. Well, I guess I want to make sure I have some personal protection so I'm not sued again if somebody comes. And I guess this core request sequence, when I watched what was going on, I kept worrying, oh, wait a minute, I don't know if we have these documents, and I'm speaking specifically about the TIF requests that came in. I didn't know what kind of liability I personally was going to have for that. and how it might affect my life. I just don't want to have additional lawsuits filed against me individually, because that's what happens. You get a summons that you're individually being a part of a lawsuit as a city council member. I don't want to be another lawsuit participant as a defendant simply because I'm a member of the DDA, and specifically the secretary, where I'm supposed to have all these documents. I know I'm working with you to get these things posted properly so they are completely to the public, that which we can post. Confidential material, I understand, it will not be posted because of client attorney privilege. But and I understand we are trying to focus to the future, not thinking about the past, but these past core requests have me worried about the past and my liability.
Yeah, I had the same concern because one of the core request items was prior to myself being chair. And thankfully, Mr. Vassalotti was able to find the information. As a matter of fact, it happened 4 days after I was named chair. Anyway, I hear you, and I'm not sure. I think it's one of a relevant question as a board member in terms of what is our liability. For instance, we are doing to the best of our ability, making sure that we are documenting everything. I hate the word transparent, but we're posting everything. We now are under the city website, so it's all public. But to your point, we're also responsible for the last 6 iterations of the board's actions, right? I think we could be held responsible, but that's really an attorney, I guess, perspective that we need to hear from. But
yeah, perhaps a compromise, Chairman Perry, is if Marcus, if you can consider my thoughts, and maybe at the next DDA meeting, you could offer up your opinions on that. I just want to make sure I'm protected. I don't want any more lawsuits that can affect anything in my life.
I completely agree with with Mr. Neal. I'm up here volunteering. I'm giving my time because I care about this city. I'm a business owner here in town. And I do not feel that because people in the past are being difficult or don't want to participate in being transparent, that somehow we're held accountable. So I feel that those things have to be resolved. Otherwise, you're not going to get anybody to ever volunteer for these boards, if that's going to be the case.
yeah, I guess I will say that open to all core requests, but I will make a blanket public statement that it is my hope that all previous and current board members collaborate in helping us do the best job possible for the public, which may include shoring up our public records, public accounting records, those kind of things. And so, one of the questions I have for the attorney is, as a board member, what responsibility do we have to cooperate in doing good for the public? Even if we're a past board member, what responsibilities do we have to make sure that the public is protected and that we've done our job properly? So I don't know. So I think it's unfair to throw it at Mr. McCaskill today, but your comments are noted, and it'll give Mr. McCaskill some time to contemplate your and Ms. Anderson's comments. But let's go ahead and move. So I'll let you we'll let you talk on C, and Rusty, I should have made you go to C, but let's get the treasurer reports done first. Then we'll go back to other board members being able to weigh in.
Okay, so this, for the month of January, we had 2 invoices presented. One is for our secretary, not our secretary, I'm sorry. Is for Rebecca Allen. She does all of our minutes for $200, and that was approved. And also we had a second invoice presented from our attorney for $4,291.50, which also has been approved. Do I need to go ahead and get a vote on that now?
I think you could go ahead and present the other two and then we can ratify. Because
Okay.
they've already been approved, so
Right.
we're just gonna be ratifying the treasurer's report.
And then you'll also find on page 86 is the January, starting in January, our new budget to actuals, and we haven't paid anything out yet, so there's nothing on there to report. And we also are now receiving on a monthly basis our tax distribution for the DDA. So that is included on the last page for your review.
And two things I'll add, Ms. Anderson. We're also working with the county to probably will be providing additional data supporting materials moving forward. Again, in the spirit of every month, hopefully you're seeing that we're trying to find some area that we can improve, that we can evolve, that we can get documented, that we can get these boundaries and structure set, because I'm an Eagle Scout, and so I was taught to leave things better than you left it or than you inherited it. And so the goal will be when I step down as chair, that we have a structure in place that the NETS body can keep moving forward with that works for the community. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here. And what I will also say is that, former members, be part of Team DDA and help us do that process, because you have a lot of important information data, like Mr. Good sharing his recollection regarding Mr. Taylor's TIF reimbursement. That was very valuable information. So anyway, so we'll continue to improve. So other board member reports, we'll start with Mr. Bourne.
I have nothing additional. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Good.
I'm amazed at the character assassination that is being put forth on Tanner Coy. I had the pleasure of sitting on this board for a long time with him, and I assure you, he has only the public's interest in mind. He's never done anything. If you want any information, he's more than willing to be there and provide it for you. So to imply that he's not forthcoming and all is a huge wrong. The documents that you want, I believe he's provided, but I'll tell you what, I'll talk to him and I'll bring in another copy for you. But his character assassination is wrong. Let's see, I had something I was gonna. As far as Cora request, I don't know the number, but it was very significant that Arden Weatherford put upon the DDA board. And yourself, I believe you.
I think I did one, right.
What I would hate to see is personal animosity towards Tanner influence what his comments that are made about him, or any attacks on him. That's all.
Okay, Mr. Gamalki.
I have nothing more.
I guess I will only add one thing responding to Mr. Good, is that from my vantage point, I personally could care less about anything attacking Mr. Coy. All I'm looking at is objectively evaluating the documents we have. The actual thumb drive was actually given to the city. And that's what we're working with the city to get put into the public record, everything that's appropriate. So all we're seeing from my chair is a hole in documents that you may be right. Mr. Coy may be able to fill that hole. You may be able to fill that hole. In particular, Ms. Larson, the former chair, may be able to fill those holes. All we're saying is there's holes, and doing the public good means we need to shore those up if we can. So to me, it's not personal. I can't speak for everyone, but it's not personal for me. So, Ms. Anderson.
I'm not taking your request for documents to be a personal attack on Mr. Coy in any way. I feel that we should have all of our documents. Just as I stated before, I am volunteering my time and I am a business owner here in town and I am a very ethical and upright citizen and person. And I would never want to be accused of something that or sued over something that I have no control over, but I do feel like whatever documents are out there, whoever has them should be turned over.
I should say Josie. Amen.
Yeah, I agree. I don't feel, first off, that anybody has been personally attacked as far as their servitude on being formally on this board. And full transparency continues before and after you're on a civil board of this type. So, but yeah, otherwise, I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Mr. Neal.
First, I'll apologize to Chairman Perry that I didn't wait till C. It was just when you were talking about the TIFs, I thought it was appropriate. I am surprised, Mr. Good, that you're taking what I said in the manner you have. There's kind of a Shakespearean saying, "Thy protest too much." I didn't say a thing about Mr. Coy. If you were listening, I have been served a subpoena. I'm being sued. I have had a criminal complaint filed against me while being a volunteer as a city council member. And it's my protection as the secretary that I wanted this discussion. I was very careful on when I brought this topic up. Mr. Weatherford is not in attendance. So it was very deliberate that I mentioned this topic with him not here. So I would ask that you go back and watch the YouTube of this, listen to my words, and not once did I do a character assassination of Mr. Coy. So I protest too much and figure that one out. I do have a report. I don't know how much we've talked about it, but the Planning Commission did meet and discuss a previous action that the DDA had initiated. And this is a liaison report I'm giving back to you from the City Council to the board members. The Planning Commission actually rejected the modification to the first floor, and then the DDA has withdrawn that. The Tava House group has been schooled on what type of construction is actually allowed, and I think there's enough flexibility in there that they're comfortable with that request being withdrawn right now, since it did not pass the Planning Commission. We could have forced it up to the City Council to vote anyway, but it was deemed not necessary. And I agree with that recommendation. So the Planning Commission recommendation will not be going forward, and that would be the extent of my City Council liaison report, Chairman Perry.
Yeah, and just to follow on that, what he's referring to is, if you recall at a previous meeting, we talked about taking a text amendment to planning. Frankly, I ended up at the end of that meeting being as confused as they were about what we were talking about. And so I think it was appropriate to withdraw it. And I think with how we're proceeding now, it's going to be Tava's responsibility to push that through planning committee and City Council if they so choose. So I think that's a more appropriate place for it to be advocated for anyway, even though we supported it. So I think that's all for anything you would like to weigh in on, Mr. McCaskill, from the attorney's report.
I think the only thing I would weigh in on is Mr. Neal and Ms. Anderson, and obviously there are some questions about, what would personal liability look like in the case that you're sued in your capacity as a member of this volunteer board. And I think that's a, it's a very good question. I would point out that the bylaws that were just the amended and restated bylaws that were just adopted, and quite frankly, the previous bylaws are very clear that as long as you're acting in your official capacity and there's no criminal conduct involved or gross negligence, that the DDA is under an obligation to indemnify the members of the board for their actions. The bylaws also contemplate that the DDA can go out and obtain what's often referred to as E&O or D&O insurance. I'm not sure if that's been done. That's something I can look into. But that's something that for an added layer of protection, if that hasn't been done, I would very much recommend that the DDA look into that to add, to ensure that there's some insurance that kick in and help cover those costs of defense. So that's something I can work with city staff on and see what the records are with respect to insurance. But, again, you're never going to be indemnified for liability if you're breaking the law, right? If you're doing something that is not in the public interest. But if you're doing, if you're acting as a fiduciary and you're making good decisions, then the DDA will indemnify, does have an obligation to protect the members of this board in that regard.
I guess I made a false assumption that we fell under the city's D&O insurance. So that may not, I think that's a great thing for us to look into for sure. Absolutely, let's do that. I'm assuming we all concur on that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, because I don't serve on any board that doesn't have D&O insurance, and I've been on a ton of boards. So I guess that's a bad miss on my part. Anyway, so we'll check. Yeah, thank you, sir. That's very good. Okay. I think we're through our agenda. Hopefully the new agenda makes sense. Again, it's a part of our continued effort to align with the city, to be more professional, to make sure that we're doing the best job possible. So,
Chairman Perry, do we need to ratify the invoice?
yes. Look at that. We need a motion to ratify the treasurer's reports.
Born so moves.
Tony Perry seconds. We'll call for the question. Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Good, yes.
Gamelki, yes.
Perry, yes.
Anderson, yes.
McCracken, yes.
Neil, yes.
Thank you for this marathon session. I don't think we'll have to do this again. Let's pray. Anyway, thanks, everyone. We are adjourned.
All the business. Okay,
You'll
Warren
adjourn?
will move to adjourn.
It is seconded. Thank you.